All right, guys. So for this next set of videos, we're really dialing in our finite state machines and starting to build in the states. So we have a couple different states that we need to do. And we're starting from, we have a finite state machine. It is working. We do have one state, and we entered into that state and we updated that state. Now, whatever that state is, it doesn't really matter. As long as the state is inheriting from this base state class. It has these four methods: enter, exit, handle, input, and update. Okay, so if we are designing a player, if we're starting with some idle state like what we have, we do want to start identifying what these transitions are and then creating the states so that we can specify specifically what is going to happen for our player and be able to control them. We want certain key combinations to do different things depending on which state we're in. So we can start adding those states, building those in, building those transitions, and then really start dialing in the controls that we have. Really, one of the biggest areas that we end up wanting to have like a good feel for is the jump animation. Because if we just add some type of impulse force moving us up, it does not feel right in most games because we feel floaty as we kind of come back down. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to start adding some states and we're going to dial in. Now, in order, what I'm going to do is I want to start dialing in my jump, which means I'm going to have to add a couple states before I can get there. I have the idle state, and that's kind of how I wanted to start my game for Go Ninja Go Ninja Go. But your game, you might have a countdown and then jump into a state. I want to go from an idle state. I'm looking for some type of key combination. I go into a jump state like the Chrome T-Rex Dino game. And then once I come back down, I'm going into a run state. So for me, I'm going to be adding another 3 states before I start dialing in my jump, because I will go from my idle state to a jump state because I push a jump, the command for me to jump. And then once I get to the top of my jump and I start going down, that's when I want to transition to a fall state. And then once I hit the ground level, that's when I want to transition to a run state. And then I still want to look for those key commands again. The reason why I want to do these, those 3 all together, is because I want to be able to, I'm looking at testing my jumps. So that means I need to be able to jump multiple times instead of just once. Okay, so that's what we're looking at. We want to start dialing in our jump. Once I can get to that point, then we can start looking at the different things that we need to do to dial on our jump. Okay, so to start off, let's create a new file and let's call it jump state. Now I can go to my state and I basically want to copy everything that's in here. And I'm going to do the same steps every time I do a state. Every time I create a state, I am going to need to basically copy everything from my state class and then write it so that I'm extending it, change it to calling the super, and then updating all of the console log values. Add that state into my dynamic creature class and then preload it into my index. Okay, so my jump state, I need to fill this out with all of this. Okay, so now we got to do jump state extends, which means that we don't have to hold on to these in the jump state. It's held by the state itself, so I can just call the super constructor. Okay, all right, and then I want to change all of these from the default state to the jump state. So I'll just do default and just change that to jump. There we go. Okay, so that's one place. Now I need to add it in my index.html file, It does not matter where I add it, but since it inherits from state, it has to happen afterwards, and it has to be in FSM. So it can be before or after the idle state. Does not matter. Okay, so I'm going to call this one jump state. And then in my dynamic creature class, so I don't have to create a bunch of these, I hold on to an instance of the state when I create that dynamic creature. So this would be a jump state, inherits the new jump state. But in this one, the jump state is poppable. We can remove it. Okay, so that sets us up for being able to transition. Now we need to look at our idle state and determine what we are going to do. I want to push a key to have us transition. So in here right now we are logging that we enter. We know that we're entering. And then we are logging that we are updating. But this handle input is also running. Now the way that I do this is that handle input is always for key controls, and update is always used for looking at the current position of our player or how our player is interacting or whatever that dynamic creature that's being controlled, the subject of that state, and then doing that state accordingly. So we want to get some type of input. So I'm going to go back to P5 play and use that as my reference, and I'm going to keep bouncing back and forth. Okay, so let's go to our input. We are looking for a keyboard input for the space bar, and we have different options that we can have. Presses is as soon as it happens. Pressing is while it happens. Holding, I can actually look for a specific amount where maybe I'm only doing something after I've held for so long or between a certain amount of holding, and release is called as soon as I release the button. So we want to do something like this. I'm going to actually just copy that over and then modify because that'll make things easier. So in here, this is transition to jump by pressing spacebar. Okay, so this will happen when I press the spacebar. Then the inside of here is what I want. I want to return that jump state. Now I already created that jump state. It's owned by the subject, in this case my player. So I just need to return the subject's jump state, and then everything should occur automatically with the transition based off of how I built my finite state machine. Now there is something that I do want to add here. Because of how I have my state set up, if there was another idle state that was being used by another enemy or an NPC, I should make sure when I'm doing some type of key inputs that this is only being done on the player, because then I can also add code in here for handling input if I have some type of AI that's moving my enemies. So I want to make sure that this .subject.type is the player. So okay, so that should set it up. Now we want to double check that this is working. Okay, let it run for a little bit. Now having these console log pieces is crucial for us to make sure that we are transitioning as we're supposed to. I'm entering, I started entering and updating my idle state. As soon as I pressed that, I went to the enter of my jump state, and then I went to my update and input of my jump state. Now I need to make sure that I actually exited out of my idle state. Do this by going to our idle state and making sure that we have some code in here for exiting. We want to make sure that we are exiting our previous state before we enter our new state. Okay, so let it run for a little bit, and then I just got to check the code. Okay, enter, update, we exited, and then we entered our jump state. Okay, now I do not need to have all these console log code in here, only when I'm trying to test something. Okay, if I leave all this stuff, it will actually start making my game start glitching out, and moving much slower. So once I know that this is kind of working, that I'm going in my jump state, then I can start kind of commenting out stuff and then re-comment it back so I can see it when I need to see a transition. Okay. So we know once we go into our jump, I need to do something. Specifically, I want to do some type of impulse move. I want to give some force for my player and move them up. But I still want to recognize gravity and everything that's acting on it. So there's a couple ways that we could do it. This one, applying force here. This is for if I'm pressing the mouse. I can set a bearing of which direction I am going to be giving a force and then applying a force. Okay, and that will take in consideration the gravity. So I have to, overcome the gravity, and the gravity will increase. If I'm trying to stop and change that direction, I have to end up applying a lot more force before it will make that change. Okay, so let's look at that. Now, in this, the force that I want to apply, and this will be applied as soon as I enter in the jump, I need to set, now this is to the sprite, okay, so not to my player. I need to set the bearing and I need to apply that force. Okay, so it would be this dot subject dot sprite dot bearing, and then I need to give it that value. And I am jumping up and I'm applying some force. Apply force. And I'm going to need to find a value. So let's say I'm doing 200. That was my jump. It was very minimal. If I do it again, that was very minimal. So let's say that I was changing this to 2000 just to get an initial jump. That's way too much, but it is a jump. Okay. Now, ideally, this amount that I'm going to be doing, after I kind of get something of a decent number, I would probably want to store this in the dynamic creature. That could be something that I'm passing in the constructor, or something that's directly being held. That way, this jump state could be used by other entities also. Okay, so the number that I've actually played around with is about 1570. And I'm somewhat okay with that in my space. Now, if I click again, I'm not able to do it because I'm in the jump state. Okay, so I need to actually look for transitioning out of the jump state into a fall state. Okay, so let's go ahead. I'm going to click stop, and we're going to create a new class. We're going to do a new state. Let's do fall state. And I'm going to copy from here all of this, go to my fall state, paste all of this, class fall state extends state. This is the super. Okay, and then I'm changing out of default to fall. Okay. I have to load in the index and in for my creature. So as long as it's before the FSM and after the state, I should be fine. Dynamic creature is going to hold one of these. Now my fall state is not permanent. It's something that could get removed. So I need to make sure that it's poppable. Okay, so that's fine. Now, from my jump state, I need to build in this transition. Now, where I would do it, I would say it's best here to transition to fall state when the y velocity is greater than or equal to 0. So when we are moving up, since my origin is in the top left, and this is the height of my canvas, when I am moving up, I'm moving in a negative direction because my y value is getting smaller. When I'm moving down, I'm moving in a positive direction. So when I'm moving up, I'm moving at a negative. At the point where my jump, I've reached the apex of my jump, that's where I'm switching directions. That's when I should be transitioning to a new state. So let's go and do that. We want to ask a conditional, and we need to look at the velocity of the sprite. So if this dot subject dot sprite dot velocity dot y is greater than or equal to 0. If that is my question, then I want to return this dot subject dot fall state. Okay, now we're doing a transition. We want to make sure that this is doing what we want. We already checked the idle to the jump, but as soon as we went into a jump and we were in the update for the jump, we immediately went into our fall state. Okay, so here, this is where our error is. Okay, now this is one way that we can check it. We know that we're in the update for the jump. Let's check what our velocity is right before we do this. So console.log, and I want this. So we are in our idle state. We go to our jump state. I'm going to stop it. This is the update, and I had a 0 velocity. Okay, even though I did apply a force here, it's not instantaneous. After a frame or so, it will switch, but it wasn't instantaneous because we have to have a velocity that starts at something. Okay, so if I wasn't trying to reset this and I ran it a little bit longer, we'll see that number change. Okay. One frame after, it's not 0. So it's just that first time. Okay, now the fix that I have found is that basically we want that velocity to be greater than or equal to 0. But since 0 is specifically set when we start, I actually want something that's negligibly 0. So for all intents and purposes, it is 0. But in terms of our program, it's not going to treat it as exactly 0. So something like this will fire when I am at the apex of my jump, but will not fire because this is not the same as 0 as soon as I go into a jump. So it will do it when I'm moving up and coming back down. So this, we should see a change. I transitioned actually to the fall state. So there was several frames that this was me moving up. I'm slowing down because of gravity. Once gravity neutralizes my upward momentum, then the number gets close enough to 0 that I'm entering my fall state and I transition my fall state. So that's good. That's what I want. I don't need to see my velocity anymore. So now I'm in my fall state. Now in my fall state, I could put, coyote jump and whatever in here, but really just to get us so we can start doing some testing on our jump, we need to transition from our fall state to our run state. So we're going to have to build in a run state, but this is where we want to transition it to. Transition to run state if colliding with the ground. Okay, now this could be with a platform also, but so let's build that in. We need to create one more state. We're going to do a run state. I'm going to copy the state to my run. class run state extends state. This is super's job. Change all these defaults to run so I can test this. Okay, now I have to go to my index. I have to add that. I got to go to my dynamic creature and build an instance of the state. Okay, all right, so fall state. Basically, I need to look for when I'm colliding with something. So let's look at our sprite and see what we have for collisions. Collisions, we can have 3 different pieces. We collide, which is right as it happens. Colliding is while it happens, and collided is right after it happens. Okay, so we can check. We just have to actually pass the sprite in that we want to check with. So that's right after it happens. Here's while it's happening. And here's as it happens. Okay, so I want to do collides with the floor. Now, the way that I have this set up right now in our sketch is that we created the platform and the floor as we built this. These are global variables just to hold while we're testing, but eventually we're going to end up having to pass in a floor and platforms as they will update and switch for a player to be checking. Okay, so that probably will end up being a list of possible things that our player could be standing on, and then we can transition that way. So in this case, though, I can just say if this.subject.sprite.collides with the floor, if that's true, then return this.subject.run state. I like it doing it like this instead of checking for if I'm at the bottom of the edge, because then if I want to build in where my ground is moving and I have like a chasm, then that would make it so I'm not automatically transitioning to run state, and I could continue to be in that fall state to, have my player die. Okay, so this would transition me to the run state. So let's see this run, because we got a lot of text on there. Fall run state. So that all happened. I went from jump to fall to run. Now what do I want to do? While I'm in my run, I want to be able to also transition back to a jump. So I could just copy this, because that's that's ultimately what I want, and that's going to be here. So now I should be able to jump as I want. Now I can't press the space bar in between. I can only do it while I'm in the idle or the jump state. Now there is a couple things that I need to do to start kind of getting this to work better. And right now, just running this, we can see that it's actually slowing down because I'm calling so many calls to my states. So at this point, this is where I would want to start commenting out all of these console.log code, because it's actually slowing down the computer as we're doing it. We know that the run state is working. We've seen a transition. We've seen the jump state transition. So I can start commenting these out. My idle, we can comment that out. My fall state. Now, as I'm trying to dial this in, I might bring some of those back just so that I can see exactly where I am. But this should make it move much smoother. Now, I still kind of have this floaty jump, which is really the next piece that we're going to be doing, and that's going to be in our next video. We're going to be dialing in our jump, which means we need to dial in the jump part of our jump, and then as we're going down the full. Okay, so that's it for this video. Make sure that you have all those states, make sure that you're correctly transitioning between them, and then you should be good to go for doing the next one where we're dialing in our jump. Good luck, have fun.